Welcome back to another episode of the Refuge Podcast. Today, I'm with Patrick Lafferty, which you're going to meet here in just a minute. And of course, I'm also with Isaac, and you've heard from Isaac numerous times, and I just want to preface this podcast before we dive into it and introduce Patrick. Make sure that you watch the first podcast that we did. That podcast is where Isaac and the other guys broke down all of the different models of what we have when we're looking at the retail real estate team leader landscape across the US. Okay, so we've identified 8 different models, 8 different kind of tiers, if you want to call them that team leaders have throughout the nation. And that is a very important podcast. If you haven't listened to that one yet and you're a team leader or you want to be a team leader, maybe you're an agent who eventually wants to start a team, or maybe you have some level of a team going on right now, I would highly encourage you to go check that podcast out. Because today we're going to be interviewing Patrick, and Patrick is going to be building or is already building the Rainmaker model, which is one of the models that we've identified. And we're going to be picking his brain on how he got to the Rainmaker model, if he plans to, eventually run a different team model, and so on and so forth. So we're very excited to have Patrick on the show today. He's extremely successful and killing the game out in Florida. So appreciate you coming on here, Patrick.
Thank you so much, Austin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to kick it over to Isaac here for a minute. Isaac's going to kind of peel back the onion, and then we're going to kick this thing off and get it rolling.
Awesome. Well, yeah, getting into it, I definitely want to ask you about your model and talk a little bit about the model, but let's get to know you real quickly. Like, give me a rundown on, why real estate, how long you've been in the game, and what you like most about what you do.
That's a really good question. So, yeah, I'm just give you a background. I'm 44 years old. I have a wife and 3 kids. When I got into real estate, I was coming off, I kind of always saw myself, I had to figure out, first of all, what an entrepreneur was. I felt something inside of where I was always focused on business, always talking to people about trying to figure out their business, even before I knew what it was. In my early 20s, I was reading about real estate investment, wholesaling, some of the stuff that Austin's into, buying and holding, flipping, all these things. So I always found real estate as like the most interesting investment channel. I was also studying stocks, and I figured I was going to go one way or the other. In the meantime, I was running a photography and web design business that me and my friends started. This was in the early 2000s to the mid 2000s. So I was in my mid 20s. And so I started my first business at about, I was one of those where I had all the businesses growing up. Like as a kid, you were washing cars or picking weeds, you're doing this, you're doing that. So I was always coming up with entrepreneurial ideas. I probably had 20 jobs by 20 kind of thing. And getting into real estate, I got in, interesting enough, because I was interested. I met a guy that was pumping concrete into buildings, and I asked him, I wanted to get into development. I'm like, I want to be a developer. So I asked them if I could if they had thought about developing real estate. He said he had. I said, how do I get involved? He said, go find me some land. I found him some land, but it was 2005, going into 2006. And we all know what happened in South Florida. At that point, in 2006, it started. So we actually purchased the land. I didn't get paid anything at that time. I didn't have my license. I was like, how do I get paid for this? He said, well, go get your, or how do I eventually, make money? And he's like, go get your license and you could sell out this project later. And so that got me my license. The project didn't end up happening, but in 2006, I got licensed. I'm still running the other business. And to be honest, in 2008, I was really unsettled with where my business was. I had a baby girl on the way. This is the middle of 2008. And I was praying into it, to be honest. I was praying like, Lord, what should I do? I was making like piddly, like nothing, like $1,500, $2,000 a month. I can't support a child on this. I know I'm meant for more than this. I know I can do more than this. And honestly, through God and others giving me a word, it was like, go get your broker's license. I was like, what? And it was like, go get your broker's license or you're going to miss what I have for you. So that's the honest story. And I went, and the next week, it was back when you did the class in person. I did the week class, got my broker's license. My wife was actually functioning in a real estate company, pulled her out of that. And we started doing rentals off Craigslist. That's literally the start of the business. So
nice.
It started very humbly. I didn't if you remember '08, it was the crash, right? Everything was crashing around. Financial markets were crashing. It was a pretty crazy era. So I said, the one thing I saw working, I was like, first of all, people, no matter what's happening, we know people need a place to live. They need shelter. Okay, so rentals are still going to happen. And Craigslist at the time was hot and it was free and I had no money. So we started posting rentals on Craigslist, and I picked a market to do it in, which is where I was at, downtown West Palm Beach. And, just built from there. So that's really the kind of the genesis story of how it all got started. And me and my wife started as a team, and we started a brokerage in '09 without even knowing. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So I was taking Remax forms and whatever else I could, Coldwell Banker, whatever I could get my hands on, because I literally was just feeling around in a dark room, trying to figure it out while I'm trying to figure out how to do real estate and figure out how to have a brokerage, and then started figuring out how to, train other agents. So that was kind of the start.
Well, that's huge, man. And right now you're running what we call might not be everyone's definition of it, but a Rainmaker model. Yeah. To remind everybody who watched the first episode, and if you haven't, please go back and watch it. Like Austin said, to remind everybody that Rainmaker model is really where you moved past indie. Indie is, hey, I'm an independent agent, but I have a staff, right? I have an assistant. Maybe I have somebody marketing for me. Maybe I have, a transaction coordinator, whatever that is. Rainmaker is where you also start bringing in people to close deals, right? And oftentimes that means you give them the overflow, but usually it's direct handoffs from past clients, from referrals that you get. And oftentimes you take the listings and have them work the buyers. Yeah. Just kind of a reminder of that. So you currently are in the Rainmaker model, but you've also kind of traveled through there. So I'm curious about one thing in particular, which is, how did you make that transition from an indie team to a Rainmaker model? Keeping in mind, actually in the first episode, we did specifically define husband and wife team still counts as indie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cause it's you guys doing the transactions, but how did you make that transition from indie to Rainmaker?
Yeah. And so we were originally, me and my wife were running kind of like front end, back end. Cause we had already, obviously I said we had a child right away. So she stayed at the house and basically lined up leads. And then I went out and knocked it out. She did all the back end. I did all the front end. So that's how it started. Then we added my mother to that equation, and we ran kind of a 3-way team. This was pretty early on, 09, 10. There weren't that many teams out there yet. But I always envisioned, I love working with people. I get energy off working with people. I always envisioned having a team. So the way that I'd say the transition started when we had our second child in 2012, and I was losing my business partner, so to speak. And I said, okay. And also what really kicked it is I said, okay, Craigslist is not I mentioned Craigslist, it's not a good long-term solution. So I'd been in the web design business. I knew nothing about SEO or SEM, but I said, I can learn this. I understand the internet to some degree. So I basically self-taught myself SEO, doing it, and then going home at night after real estate and learning, tweaking, trying stuff on the website. Started my first little website, had the smallest little budget for AdWords. Because at first you have no SEO. So I figured, okay, I got to pay for leads. And honestly, that was the kind of genesis of what happened is getting enough leads that it was more than I could handle. And so it was started very small. I remember, I think starting with like $100 AdWords budget, super tiny. Mm-hmm. And I just tested and tweaked and saw what worked, saw what leads we get. I handled most all the leads in the beginning. And then in 2012, my wife gets pregnant with our second. And I'm like, all right, you're going to be out for a little bit. So I had to hire my first agent. And I also hired an admin to start. I felt like I needed administrative help. And I hired the worst admin. That's neither here nor there. But, because I saw everything. I actually moved her later into a sales position because she was not actually administratively strong. But anyways, that's kind of how it started. Is I started generating more business than I could handle, but I was still learning the business. So, which gets into some of the challenges of trying to wear every hat and train agents as you're figuring it out yourself. So, but that was kind of the transition going from, individual kind of team to building out a team, starting to set structure. It was really out of need. wow, I have way more leads than I can handle. This is great. Let's start hiring.
Nice. So, and that's actually probably almost everybody's way of getting into rainmaking, right? Like, I think that's the definition of rainmaking is I have more business to handle than I personally either can or choose to handle.
Yeah.
And you get to, without using the term cherry pick, right? Cherry pick the stuff that makes sense for you, hand out. Austin, I'd like to pick your brain on this.
Yeah.
From a macro perspective. And then Patrick can kind of flow in and out and say like, yeah, I dealt with that too. What are some of the pros and cons of a Rainmaker model? Because I know you've been through pretty much all of these cycles. Now you run what we call enterprise level business, 140 agents, 3 locations, centralized leadership model, where you're no longer in production day to day. But looking back on the Rainmaker model and some of the people that you've helped in the Rainmaker model, what are some of the challenges that you find? What are some of the pros? And keeping in mind for everyone in the audience, there's no judgment in that. Like, you could be a Rainmaker forever. That's that's some people's power spot. That's where their viability lies. So Austin, share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think phenomenal question, Isaac, and I appreciate you asking. Hopefully the viewers there are going to get a lot of value out of this. I think that when you look at the Rainmaker model, for me, when I was in that boat, right, you're pretty profitable, and I think that that's a big pro, right? Like, a big pro to being in that box is that you're running a pretty profitable little operation. Like, you're keeping a lot of money, right? And I think that, when we look at the landscape of entrepreneurs and business owners, right? Like, why do we all get into it to begin with? At the end of the day, sure, we all like to help people. We're Christian on the podcast. We talked about that, right? And, that's all great. And we want to do all that. But, at the end of the day, we're not running a nonprofit, right? We're all here to make money. And we're here to give our family a good life, to give our kid, to leave a legacy, right? And we do that by keeping money in the bank. We don't do that by spending every dollar that we make. And I think when we're in the Rainmaker model, we can be very profitable. We don't have a ton of overhead yet. There's not, to your point, Isaac, the for lack of better terms, we get to kind of cherry pick maybe what we really want to do. And so for me, I remember being in that kind of season of my life, and that was obviously very good. So I think that's a big pro, right? A con might be that, and I think for me, looking back at it, is that, you're really still in the trenches, right? You're very much in the thick of it. You're very much in the day to day of it. Like, without you, it doesn't really, do its own thing. Maybe to a degree it does, but ultimately you can't take a year off, right, and come back and have more money in the bank than when you left, and so I think that might be a con, right? A con is that, hey, I've got to be active. I've got to be in it. I've got to be doing it. And without me, it won't run, and so I think there are pros and cons. And to your point, Isaac, you bring up a phenomenal point, which is that, and what I love about what we're doing with the Refuge Podcast and interviewing such amazing people, right, like Patrick, is that everybody has different goals. Not everybody wants to do what I did, right? And they shouldn't. Like, they can't, right? Like, and I think that it's such a valuable podcast in the sense that we really get to peel back the onion on the pros and cons of every single model that you can run with being a real estate team leader. And so, yeah, hopefully that provides some good insight. Would you agree with that, Patrick?
Absolutely. Yeah. I was going to say, you can lead, the advantages of a Rainmaker model is that you can lead for some time, but you're right. You're not going to come back a year later and that thing's going to be maybe doing better than you left it. Like, there is a point in which, unless you had gotten to the point of, where you guys are saying it's probably transitioning to more enterprise where management is in place underneath you, but you are essentially the main character of that. And it's still a lot of personality driven, and that main person being in the middle of it, that your people respect and they listen to, and they continually invest in the growth. So yeah, I would absolutely agree. There are a lot of advantages, but it's not quite to that point.
Yeah. I think there's value to any of them, right? I call it, getting in bed with the agent or getting in bed with the leader. And here's what I mean by that. I use that phrase because there's a little bit of like shock value to saying that, but also it's this: what keeps you up at night?
Yeah.
Because what keeps you up at night might be different than what keeps me up.
Yeah.
Right. And what gets you out of bed? Because what gets you out of bed? So like what keeps you laying and tossing and turning in the bed? What are the things that plague your mind and your heart and give you a heartburn? Right. And keep you up at night? And what are the things that get you so excited you can't wait to get out of bed?
Yeah.
That answer is different for different people. And so the Rainmaker model makes perfect sense for some people who being at an enterprise might keep them up at night, worrying about leaders and all these other things. And like, I get paid last. And like, if I haven't sold a house in so long, right? Those are things that keep people up at night. And they're like, the Rainmaker model makes more sense because I get to go to bed at night. Earlier, the same token, hey, I love working with clients. I love the thrill of I go out today and I come back with a signed listing.
All right.
And that instant gratification versus what Austin might have to do is create a sales funnel and the process and teach everybody and then have the person who he taught teach the other people who finally actually get the lead and then transact. And then it rolls back up 7.5 months later. Yeah. Right? Like those are some challenges there. Yep. So, talking about that though, in the team model that is Rainmaker, I'm curious, Patrick, and then also Austin, when you were in this model, I'd love to hear your answer. How do you go about choosing which clients you keep and which ones you pass through?
I think you, I've been, just to clarify, I've been in production and out of production. Right now, I'm currently back in production. I would say you get to really select your clients based on who you want to work with and where your wheelhouse is. So I say that to say, like, if my main market that I know so well and where I'm comfortable and confident is downtown West Palm Beach and I go like 2 square miles, I stay in that zone and I hand out everything else. And I may hand it to an agent that I may still get involved in the deal, but like their intimate knowledge of the neighborhood and the area is really what I need to be in play with the client. So I'm basically brokering within my own team. I'm a talent broker going, hey, where, who am I giving this to? Who's the better fit? And if they have a gap, like if it's me needing to come in and provide confidence to the client or, just whatever it is, right? It's usually giving them leverage to substantiate them. For me, on the selection of the client, it's like, it's who I think I'm going to work well with and is in my wheelhouse. That's pretty much my main. And it varies at what season you're at in the business, because there was times where no matter who it was, I gave it out. Unless I thought, wow, this is really going to change my career. If I do this deal, this could change the path of. It's like and I've given some of those out.
National athlete or something like that.
Yeah, I've given some of those out by mistake and it still worked. Like our biggest sale, it was like 16.5 million a few years ago. And that was a lead I gave out through the website that came in. Now I got involved in that, but my 2 buyer's agents, I kept it with them. I didn't take it back. A lot of Rainmakers will, they'll say, oh, this is too big for you. And they'll take it back. I never wanted to do that to my people. I'm really invested in them. They're like family. So for me, I just help them secure and close that business.
Nice. How about you, Austin?
Yeah. Well, that was literally what I was about to say. What Patrick just said is what I was going to add, right? Which is that the only other factor that you're going to consider, I think, when you're the Rainmaker is how big of a commission is it about to be, right? And depending on that number, and obviously that's a more transactional way of looking at it, right? But I think that we're all human, right? We're all in the business again to make money. And I think that, when you're running that model, look, if a $5 or $10 million buyer comes through or a seller, typically the Rainmaker, the guy running the show, is going to take that deal, right? And then on the smaller stuff, under $1 million, and again, it'll depend on what market you're in, right? Will obviously depend on the price point, but the smaller stuff is typically going to be the stuff that you're going to refer out to your team and let them handle that, right? And so I think that there's the approach, Patrick's initial point of, hey, who am I going to vibe well with? Who can I serve at the highest level, right? All of that should come first if you're a good person and you do good business. But then the immediate next logical thing to think about is how much money is the deal going to make, right?
Yeah, and I think the other factors that factored in for me would be certainly geography. Right? Like, hey, this is where I farm. This is where my face is, right? My business partner's face is, or whatever. Or who knows the area the best. I think that's important. And then the other one that we've always used was obviously, like, is it a listing or a buyer?
Yeah.
Right.
I always look at it like I may not be the best person for that lead. I may be the best person to come beside my agent and substantiate them, but they may be, if it's an area that I'm not super proficient, I'm a guy who likes to sell out of like the knowledge of my product in the area. So if I'm not that for it, then I don't, it's not for me. I'll just help.
Yeah. So let's talk about that too. The help part, right? So you're either handing off people that that know you, that are calling you, past clients, their referrals, or you're handing out leads, right? That's literally what we're talking about. What do you do on a regular basis, Patrick, to make sure that when you hand those leads out, you're handing them to the right people, but more importantly, that they're actually going to convert and help the client get what they need to get?
Yeah. So I guess my goal when I set it up, this is like kind of multi-pronged, but we went once again with the model of website leads. So first of all, I had to train buyer's agents. I trained pretty much my main buyer's agents from scratch. So it wasn't like I brought in a bunch of talent. I was young and not well known. So I felt like I had to home grow it, so to speak. I wasn't coming with, as you get bigger as an agent, you can recruit bigger. But when you're small, so I was bringing in people, I was bringing in friends and bringing in people that I just felt good about. I felt they met the fit well with the culture. I think culture is super important with a team like this. And today I spend a lot of time or a lot of thought defending the culture, making sure that the people are there, aren't toxic, aren't bringing the whole group down. But going back to how do I give out the leads, I was training buyer's agents and I was training them in specific areas. I want you to be Palm Beach Gardens, Jupiter, in our area, like the north end, the south end, and central, like West Palm Beach. So I wanted everybody to have a specialty. Every Tuesday, we have a growth meeting for the team where it's really about them growing and it can be in life, business, their psychology, their mindset, their actual skill set, scripts, whatever it is. It could be their, financial life. I wanted to grow the team, but I figured, because, I found out too that, listen, if they're not personally well, they're not good for business. See, they're not doing well in business. Austin, you find the same?
Yeah, 100%. I always tell people, you don't have business problems. You have personal problems that you're bringing into your business, right? Exactly. And I couldn't agree more. If you're out of shape and you freaking have terrible relationships and you're all jacked up mentally and you're not sleeping and you're eating crap and and everything's all messed up, you're not gonna make $200,000 a year for whatever amount of money. Like the two don't go together, right? Like you can't. So I completely agree with you, 100%.
And I think a good Rainmaker is a good matchmaker, for this model. You have to be like I said, kind of like a talent broker. You might talk to so for instance, some of these leads are going straight through the website. They're going into people's, inboxes. They're going, we work out of a system called Follow Up Boss on the back end. So we have a great site and then it's feeding into Follow Up Boss. Those leads are divvied up, but sometimes I might, in the early stages, I would call some of those leads myself, figure out who I thought was the best fit for them, and then divvy them up. Later on, it was more systemized. And then if we still felt like if I did get a hold or someone called me directly or I got a hold of them first, I would literally just think about who's a good fit for this. Yeah. And I would put it in their hands, right? And I would hype them up on the phone, not myself. I knew I had to hand it off. A lot of people don't know how to transition to this model because they don't know how to do that part, like be able to promote their people and hand off. They need to be able to hand off business and make it less about them and be okay sitting in the background with their name not in lights. I mean, everyone has a different model because you could have your name in lights from the list side and have everybody else doing something. Mine was more, I'm behind everything, but your people aren't really, at one point, they're not really talking to me that much. They're not really seeing, it's not the Patrick Lafferty show. It was Modern Living Group, So creating a brand, having it in front, promoting your people, doing that you could do that through social, the website, all forms of media through the actual calls. So I would say, you have to have, systems, you have to figure out the systems and who are going to, within that. So if you're doing online leads, who's going to receive this lead? Like if I want it by zip code, I want it by price point. I'm going to try to match. And as the agents, this is important, as they were coming up, I would kind of unleash a new price point for them. I would give them a few kind of tests and see how they're doing with that. And when I felt they were ready, for instance, million and above, all of a sudden I started, kind of unleashing those leads, the million and above. I didn't give the million and above to the, 1 to 2 year agent coming in. So they had to prove themselves, and then they got promoted, so to speak, within the price point, amount of leads, et cetera.
Nice. Yep. So here's what I heard, just like for anybody who's like, hey, how do I do this? I'm having that same problem with like releasing leads because that represents money and I need to get an ROI, right? So here's what I heard Patrick say is, one, he has a holistic coaching approach. So he has scheduled training, but it's not just about how do you do the script? It's also how are you doing as a human, right? To make sure that when they are taking the call, that they're ready and locked in. What I also heard is that you're good at matchmaking. So you understand who the agents are, what their power, what their strong points are, maybe what their weak points are. In addition to that, you're also giving them a leg up by hyping them up and building up that credibility in the eyes of the lead, which is also going to enhance the opportunity to convert, right? The other thing I heard is you have a systematic approach to proving competency at this level before you allow this level.
Absolutely.
And so, and it sounds like you also have everything documented, right? They have a process to follow. They have a system. They know when it comes into this system, I claim it, I call within this amount of time, right? All those documented things. And it also sounds, and so those pieces are, especially that like prove your competence so you can unlock new levels. That's a version of accountability.
Yeah.
Right. So you have accountability systems. So I heard training, good insight, good accountability systems and systems overall that support that. So anything there that you would add, Austin, in terms of, hey, you're handing leads over. Here's how you make sure you get your ROI back.
No, I think you guys both nailed it. You nailed it right on the money. I don't have anything to add to that. Yep.
Nailed it. First time ever.
All right. Approved.
You guys keep watching this podcast. That'll probably be the last time I nail it.
No, you guys rock.
I love it, man. So, Patrick, talk to us a little bit about what your goals are. Like, where do you want to take this thing? Is Rainmaker the end all be all for you? We've already talked about how that's some people's, or like, where do you go with this, man?
I would say I was really trying to, move into kind of Austin's level at the enterprise level. I think there's a gap there. It's challenging. I would say some of my challenges have been like not having a business partner and wearing so many hats, trying to drive so many things at once. You're basically just, if you have 8, little marbles in front of you and you're just pushing them a little bit at the time, and then they're rolling back at you by the time you get around to the first one you push. That's kind of how it was to start this business and sometimes still is, so I would say, having a business partner or two in that would help with it, where you have proficiencies that each other doesn't have. You share values, but the competencies are different. I haven't really had that. So I think that would be maybe a gap to getting to the next level. It's that, or you make enough money to hire the right people and get there. But so enterprise level, but really in my heart of hearts, I want to go back to what I originally, I've always wanted to be a developer. And so we're developing my first house coming out of the ground here soon. I'm in permit process. I still in my heart, that's really the path that I want to have the real estate company functioning and doing well. And they complement each other. Obviously, if I'm building beautiful homes or whatever in the area and I have a sales team, it's obviously complementary, but I really want to continue to progress into that, which was why I always wanted to have a team and a model that I didn't have to be there 24/7. I could pull away, I could come back, I could, which is some of the advantages, obviously. And, getting to Austin's level, you have even more leverage and even more ability to spend your time elsewhere, right? And pursue some higher level business building activities. So,
yeah, I love it. Yeah.
But developers probably, if I had to name it, what I have my eyes on.
Yeah. Well, and you actually started answering the next question, which was like, all right, where do you see the gaps in getting there? right? So one is having somebody, I think you articulated really well, man. I wish I would have written that down. You said, same beliefs, but different competencies or something like that. Same values.
Shared values, but different competencies. Yeah. Because
there's one. What else? What other gap do you see in getting there, or what? Maybe it's not a blind spot. Maybe it's something you're actively working on right now. That you see as being the bridge over that gap. And then I'd love to open up to Austin and kind of say like, okay, cool, man. In general, how could we help Patrick and other people in his position?
I mean, I would even direct it to Austin. I'll say piece, but I'd love to hear because he's actually done it. I think it's. It comes down to at some point you really need some A players in your organization to build on. You need to be able to pay them well to keep them, reward them well. And I think your systems have to increase. I have probably weaknesses in areas, and I don't know. Like I said, for me, it was the kind of gap of having someone else there that could help to take on you tackle this, I'll tackle this part of the business. But I would defer to Austin and hear what he has to say on that.
Yeah. I think you're right on the money, Patrick, and phenomenal question, Isaac. And, I think that at the end of the day, I have partners in every company that I own. So I currently run and operate probably eight companies at a pretty high level, with, I would say, probably 4 of them will do multiple 7 figures annually. So, I have partners in every company that I own. I have CEOs, COOs, CFOs in the majority of them. I'm actually not the acting CEO in any company anymore that I own. I am the president of a couple of the companies. I'm CGO of a company. I'm obviously the founder or the co-founder of every one of them. But I would not in any way, shape, or form be able to do what I do without incredible partners, period. Right. And I think that I learned that early on. Now, there's obviously a trade-off. And Patrick, you brought up a really interesting point. And my advice to you would be to really sit back and think about it. For anybody watching the show, there are 2 ways that I believe, in my opinion, you scale any company, right? Number 1 is you bring in a partner. Okay. You give up equity, right? You give up equity, you bring in a partner. And I encourage anybody who hasn't read the book Traction and Rocket Fuel to read Traction and Rocket Fuel. Those are 2 incredible books that talks a lot about the visionary and the integrator. So, you bring in a partner, right? Option 1, give away equity. And you don't necessarily have to pay them a salary, right? So it doesn't cost money to partner with somebody. It costs future money to partner with them because you're giving up equity. But it doesn't cost money day one necessarily to bring in a partner, which is why a lot of people bring in a partner, right? Because in a way, you're hiring somebody for free, if you will, right? And so that's an option that a lot of people do. Now, you obviously, to your point, Patrick, you want to find somebody that complements whatever it is that you're not good at. So if you're, whatever it is that you're great at, you want to find somebody that is great at different things, right? Now, the other way that you scale any company, in my opinion, is you hire somebody. You hire people at a C-suite, kind of upper echelon level, right? You pay somebody 6 figures, might be $100,000 a year, $150,000, $200,000 a year, depending on the role, right? And maybe they have a teeny tiny bit of equity, maybe, right? Maybe you give them a couple percent of the profitability, or you figure out a way to incentivize them when you scale, but they don't have a big chunk of equity. They're making a big salary, and then maybe they just have some way to be incentivized to scale. Right. And so those are the 2 different ways that I think that a person can actually scale and achieve the outcome of, hey, I want to go on vacation. I just went to, about a month or 2 ago, I went to Dubai, I went to Thailand, I went to the Maldives, back to back, right? Me and my fiance, we traveled all around the world. We took 9 airplanes. And I made more money while I did that than the companies grew while I was gone, right? Every one of my companies, every single one of them, they all grew while I was gone. I made it a real effort to not even check my phone or my computer while I was there. I did a little bit in the morning, but hardly at all did I work, So, I think that it comes down though, again, to what is the goal, right? Is the goal to even do any of that? Because again, the downside for me, if there was a downside, if we had to find the con, right? The con is I've given up equity of every one of my companies, right? Like just straight up, like that's the con. At the end of the day, one could argue, Patrick, that you own 100% of what you own, and I don't, right? I do not own 100% of anything that I own, and so there's the con, right? The con is that on paper I make less money than if I owned 100%, but if I went away tomorrow, the company would keep growing, right? So there's pros and cons.
It's also, you want to own 100% of a grape or a watermelon, or 20% of a watermelon, that's the kind of, you do have to think about that. So, and you're
down. And then the last thing I'll add with that, and I think anybody, and Patrick, I'm glad that we have you on the show in particular, and I'm glad that we started off the show with talking about Christianity. And I love talking about my faith, and I'm very open about it. But I would just, and you don't have to be a faith person to listen to what I'm about to say necessarily. But what I would say is when you partner, I've had probably 15 or 20 partners over the years. I've started 12 different companies. Half of them have failed. Half of them have succeeded. The biggest piece of advice I can give to anybody when bringing on a partner and giving away equity is to make sure that not only they're good at what you're not good at, but that even more importantly, that whatever values you live by, that they live by similar values.
Yep.
Okay. It's extremely imperative that when people make partnerships, if you're a Christian and you go to church on the weekends and you run and you operate your personal life a certain type of way, you will fail if you partner with somebody who likes to do cocaine and party and go to the clubs and do all that. It will not work long term because you have different values. You live your life totally different. And so it might work in the short term because you guys are, good at different things and you're able to bet long term, it isn't sustainable.
I'm sure you're pretty, choosy about how do you go about finding a partner?
Dude, every one of my partners they all share and live their lives very similarly to how I live mine. Every single partner that I have in any company that I own, they and it wasn't always this way. I learned this by doing it the hard way. I learned by failing, right? Which is why we're doing the podcast. So hopefully we can prevent people listening to not have to go through it. But every one of my partners now, they're all phenomenal human beings outside of work. They all would give their last dollar to the homeless person on the side of the road. Like that, we just all share similar values. None of my partners are big partiers. None of them, use drugs. Nobody's an alcoholic, right? Like, it's just like, and I have nothing against people that, have a different way of life. It's just that I'm not going to partner with them.
Right.
Yep.
Agreed.
So kind of coming in for a landing, I got maybe two more questions if you guys have the time. One is, how big a role has access played in your growth for both of you guys? And here's what I mean by access. So for me, a big part of my success has been, I've just had access to amazing people, right? Mentors and mastermind, I've been paying for coaching for almost the first month I got into real estate, right? It's because from the previous career I had, I paid a coach as well.
Yep.
And so I've always been big on, I can look and actually identify the times where my success has gone from like here to this kind of angle. And I'm like, yeah, that's when I got introduced to that person or to that group or to that method or hired that coach. Have you guys seen the same reflected in your life?
Let's start with you, Patrick.
I don't know. Yes. Especially on spiritual tip, I've had some mentors, some good pastors, some leaders around me, some people that I stay accountable to. And I think that that's important. On the business side, I always wanted like a business mentor to come from somewhere. And it's funny, only right now and in life I'm actually a part of this group of Christian men that are either running businesses or ministries, and it's an iron sharpening iron group. And it's pretty cool because we get together and discuss each other's issues in this, space where it's like you have an hour and you discuss kind of throughout your issue. Everyone weighs in on it and everybody prays for you at the end. It's been pretty awesome. And within there's probably like 2 mentors for sure, because there's 2 mentors of the group that are in their 70s, and they've dropped a lot of wisdom for sure and just experience. But mine has been books, probably, to be honest. I'm a huge reader, avid reader. I anything I wanted to learn, I just would go find, either the book or the video or something to figure out how to do this. I think that's very important in success in general, is you going like, I will find the resource that I need, so mine has not been as much. I've definitely had, I'm not saying I'm self-made by any means. I'm saying I haven't had one set business mentor that kind of set it off for me, but I think I've had little ones along the way that I'm from, and then definitely books and, great interactions with people. So that's been awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I instantly knew you were a reader. As soon as he mentioned traction and rocket fuel, you grabbed your pen. If anybody goes back and watches, he grabbed his pen and immediately wrote it down. I was like, oh, he's a reader.
Yep. Well, and he's sitting in front of a bookshelf.
That's true too. But you know what? That
it's real.
People
too.
Decorate their offices with books. Doesn't mean they read them.
Yeah. Well, not a green scheme.
I've actually read all these.
I love that. Yeah. I just moved into a new office, so that's why my bookshelf's all empty right now. But normally
my office when I went at home too.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. To answer your question, Isaac, phenomenal answer, Patrick. I really liked everything that you said. I'm a big believer that in every area of your life, you should have somebody that is in your, at least one person, if not multiple, if not a group of people that are at the level that you want to get at. And what I mean by that is we have, and in my opinion, there's roughly about 5 areas I believe in all of our lives. We have financially, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, and I think mentally. If I didn't say that once, spiritually, financially, relationally, emotionally, physically. So we have these different areas of our life, right? And I think when it comes to one of my mentors told me a long time ago, he said, Austin, he said, very rarely will you find somebody that has what you want in every area of life. Like a lot of times, the guy that you take advice from financially might not be somebody you take advice from relationally, right? Like I've had mentors in my life before that in business, they were phenomenal business people. Like they knew, they were great marketers, they were great at sales, they were great at building teams, whatever it might have been, but they had bad relationships. Like they didn't have a good relationship with their wife. They didn't have a good relationship, right? And so I'm a big advocate of treat everything like a buffet table, take what you like, leave what you don't, right? And yes, Isaac, I believe in real estate and financially. I think that, I'm a huge advocate of having mentors. I'm also a big advocate of being a part of masterminds. I'm a part of multiple masterminds. I'm a part of, I run an education program for real estate. So I myself am a leader of a quote unquote mastermind. And I think everybody should have, or be plugged in to some sort of group of people that have been where they're trying to go. Because then what you do, Isaac, is you just pick up the phone, right? Like, if I'm at a particular place in my business, if I'm capped out at 8 million a year and I'm trying to get to 15 million a year in top line revenue, then I just call somebody in my group or in my mastermind and I'm like, yo, how the heck did you freaking go from 8 to 12? Like, I need you to tell me, right? And then they just tell you because they don't have a scarcity mindset and they care about you and they want to help you win. And there's nothing more valuable than that, right? Like I would pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in any scenario to have access to people that have been where I want to go 100% of the time. Yeah.
That's huge. So coming in for a landing, the last kind of piece is, and Patrick, I'd like to kick it to you and then maybe I'll give a short answer and then have you send us out with it, Austin. So somebody's looking to implement a Rainmaker model. Like that's what gets them out of bed. Mm-hmm. They're an indie right now. Maybe they're an enterprise, but it's like dude, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. But actually, let's take it from the indie thinking about going Rainmaker or really want to plug into their Rainmaker. Patrick, what advice can you give them? What are some things that like you've done well that you've identified? Like, hey, if you do this, you'll see success. And if you stay away from that, you'll be better off. Like, what are some of those things that come to mind for you?
Say it again for me. I'm sorry, Isaac.
So if I'm an indie agent, running an indie model, maybe I have an assistant and a showing agent and a transaction manager.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for me? I want to be a Rainmaker, dude. I want to be just like you. Like, what are some things I need to do?
I mean, you need to figure out your main driver of the business that's going to drive you more business than you can handle, and then get the right people. You're going to have to figure out, who do I need to support that? Am I bringing in talent or am I growing talent within, right? And bringing in talent is quicker and easier. It's more of a cultural challenge than bringing talent and growing it. But growing talent from within takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of your investment or somebody's investment of time. So you got to figure out how you're going to, what level are you at to attract the people you need? Or do you need to attract maybe younger people and grow them into the position? And then you've got to be throwing off enough. You got to be able to feed the team and create a machine. So the main, I would say, driver to like, is it coming from the listing side? Like, am I creating a huge amount of listings and my team is functioning to show those listings? There's administrative help, there's showing agents, there's a marketing, person or team. And depending on how big that is there an office manager? I mean, I think office manager is key that can kind of hold things down. They may function as a bit of they may not be a sales director, but they function as just having their hands in everything and making sure that helping make sure the pulse of everything.
Processes are followed, stuff like that.
So you need like you need a center core that's good. And then you need the agents that you are either training or bringing in, and they're able to execute on the business you're giving them. And you're just creating a machine that's really, because when I went out of production, it felt great. I was like, this thing is functioning without me. And that was like 2020, 2021 to I think 19, 2020, 2021, 2022. But then obviously when things get challenging, sometimes the Rainmaker has to come back into the business. Also, people's mentalities get down when you're in a downward momentum. I mean, if I'm honest, that's where we're at right now in our marketplace. I'm having to get in and figure out how to create upward momentum, right? And how to make sure I help manage mindsets, because that's some of the hardest thing is when you're going through a downward spiral, the market is against you. It's managing everybody's mindsets, keeping the team. I'm sure Austin deals with this on an even bigger level. It could even be, hopefully it's not his partners, but it could even be to that point, but it's from the top down, right? And so it's figuring out what you need next for your model. So it really depends on if you're going, I came from the buy side model where I drove buyers leads. I actually had to get to the list side by just having so many buyer opportunities and being in buildings so much that I was just talking to people, networking. I call it riding the elevator hard, which is you're in the building so much up and down and talking to people, and people are seeing you and they know who you are. Maybe they've seen you on the internet or social media or whatever. So I actually came in that way. I had to build it from coming in the buy side. So for instance, my model was, I knew SEO and SEM was key to create the amount of leads I needed. Now I needed a system to manage those leads properly. Then I needed a system that I could create accountability within the agents that I'm giving those leads to. And in the early days, I met with them once a month and I reviewed not each individual lead, but I said, okay, you had 79 leads this month, and what deals are you working on? And I might pull some significant ones, but I'd be like, what deals are you working on? What did you close last month? And what problems are you having in that? So that was for instance of a meeting that I did every month. Right now I have actually he's part-time, but like a life coach that helps keep them accountable to their own, to their own goals and keep their mind straight. And so I'd say that's really knowing your driver, and then knowing, okay, how do I drive the business? And then I got to create systems around that to create ROI.
Yep. Yeah. Excellent. I'm just going to add one small thing. You want that life.
Yeah.
Right? Like if someone's like, hey, I'm an indie, blah, blah, blah. Listen to what he just described and what he had to break down. Is that the life you want?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good indicator. Austin, send us home with anything you would give advice for on making that transition. What is it going to take? Yeah,
it's just systems and processes and people, man. I mean, at the end of the day, as you continue to scale, it's just, I mean, really, systems and processes, right? And really dialing it in and fine tuning it, right? And then just the right people, right? The right people, people, and that'll really get you to that next level. I really believe that.
Yeah, you kind of got to know your metrics too, right? Often, like, you got to know, and you got to keep an eye. So it is for business people. Like, you got, if you're not, meaning it's entrepreneurial, you have to grow yourself in it. If you don't have that mindset, you need to be a business person. You have to be wanting to run a business, not just a personal sales business, but an actual business. So I'd say you need to have that mindset. And if you don't have it, you got to grow in it if you want to get there.
I totally.
That's where mentors, coaches, stuff comes in.
Yeah.
Well, Patrick, I appreciate you, man, because you helped us really crack open this model for people that are in it. I think we got a lot of insight from you into, okay, maybe I'm not alone, or, hey, here's some things that I'm missing, or things like that. I feel really empowered by that. Austin, obviously, you gave us really good insight into what that could look like and how to scale it. We also identified some gaps maybe to making it to the enterprise level, which is great. And I love that. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here. But Patrick, one thing I do know is that we're here for you, brother. Like that network, Refuge, we it's not just a podcast, right? It's a group of people. And so we appreciate that. And one of the things I want to just remind everybody that's watching this is, we're all givers. And so if you do have questions, if you want to learn more about what we're doing at Refuge, I know I speak on behalf of myself, Keith, and Danny, and Austin, that, hey, we're here, we're available. And so that extends to anybody watching this as well. But we really appreciate the time, man, and giving us your time and giving us your insight, brother.
I appreciate you guys, and thank you for that. That you're there past the podcast. I appreciate that. It's been a good time. Love to learn from Austin as well.
The last thing, Danny, real quick, is where can people find you? Where do they get a hold of you? And if they want to join your team, if they're out in Florida, somebody's listening, how do they get a hold of you?
You could just go to our website, modernlivingre.com. Go to the contact page, probably fill that out. Or my Instagram handle's @modernliving. So you could find me on there too. DM me either way. Just also my email, patrick@modernlivingre.com.
Awesome, Patrick. We really appreciate it.
Nice.
There you have it, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Refuge Podcast, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a future episode.